evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. If you've been watching the other channels lately, there is at least one thing you've learned about the caravan of Central American migrants currently marching toward our southern border. The whole thing is no big deal. These are nice people, every single one of them, much better people than you are. They have the deep moral authority that comes from living in a third world country, unlike you, Mr. Pampered Suburbanite. They're not invaders. They are future model Americans. There is nothing at all to worry about, we're told. Well, that's been the chorus from politicians and news anchors who think they're politicians for weeks and weeks now. If you have any concern at all about this caravan, you are a bad person. In fact, you, sir, are a racist.
All of this for a group of people, a lot of whom are mothers and children, who pose no imminent threat to the United States.
To call this an invasion, it might be the most pathetic invasion of a country in world history if this were actually an invasion, but of course it's not.
The president sending troops to the border to deal with a caravan that hasn't proven to be violent.
Stop saying they're monsters. They're more mothers than monsters. Don't say it. Why don't any of you say that?
There's the line of the day, more mothers than monsters. Turns out that's not quite right. More brothers than mothers, actually. According to the Border Patrol, the caravan is in fact about 70% single men. Not families, women and children, but overwhelmingly single men. According to Mexico's own ambassador, many in the group are, quote, very violent. That's what he recently told NPR. So to restate, the caravan is in fact heavily male and highly dangerous. When the Mexican ambassador says that to public radio, what you're looking at, obviously, is racism, more right-wingery. Just kidding. What we're actually seeing is relentless dishonesty from the very people who are paid to inform us. There's nothing to worry about, they tell us, like we're children. But they don't really know that. They don't really know anything. They are wholly ignorant and yet utterly self-confident. They are good at moralizing and light on facts. So who exactly is in the caravan? A lot of them probably are what they appear to be, poor people from disorganized countries looking for a better life. It's understandable. But are some of them gang members too? How about drug dealers or human traffickers? Shut up, say the news anchors. Don't ask those questions. But if you really cared about America, you'd want answers to those questions. You would insist on knowing. Would you let your kids sleep at a stranger's house? Probably not. You love your kids. Our leaders ought to feel the same way about us. They don't. Instead, they see their own countrymen as the real threat. In the minds of the people making our country's rules, foreigners are always superior to Americans. Watch Don Lemon explain.
So we have to stop demonizing people and realize the biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized up to the right. And we have to start doing something about them. There is no travel ban on them. There's no ban on, they have the Muslim ban. There is no white guy ban. So what do we do about that?
We have to start doing something about them, Don Lemon says. Keep in mind that he's talking about an entire racial group currently living in this country. What exactly does Don Lemon have in mind for, quote, them? Deportation, internment camps, more affirmative action? It would be good to know. Some of us would like to tell our sons what's coming. We contacted CNN today to ask them what they plan to, quote, start doing to this dangerous group of racially defective Americans. They never replied. Maybe Lemon will be more specific about his plans on tonight's show. But without even hearing the details, it's pretty clear where the people on TV stand. They instinctively side with foreign nationals over American citizens every time. If you're wondering why they're far more upset about migrant camps in Mexico than homeless encampments in Orange County, that's why. Just yesterday in the New York Times, a columnist called Michelle Goldberg noted approvingly, the Democrats can win elections in Georgia if the bad old people who don't agree with her agenda are displaced by a large group of new people who do. Her piece was entitled, "We Can Replace Them." Imagine writing something like that about your fellow Americans. Imagine running it in your newspaper. They didn't think twice, because that's how they really feel. Peter Kirsanow is a U.S. Civil Rights Commissioner. He joins us tonight. Peter, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks, Tucker.
Have you noticed the disparity in outrage between the way our television moralizers feel about the migrants camped by the side of the road in Mexico and their fellow Americans camped permanently outside across our country, the hundreds of thousands of American homeless, never mentioned in the media. Why is that?
Well, you know, I think you've expressed it a few times. We've talked about it, and that is that the left has an obsession with identity politics for a lot of reasons. One, because of moralizing, but more importantly, for those who have to put, where the rubber meets the road, is for votes and for political imperative. The statements that you just ran were, they're incoherent. They are, some of them are just frankly racist, and they completely misapprehend the concern of most normal Americans with the caravan. Most normal Americans are not concerned about the race, ethnicity, or the gender identity of the participants in the caravan.
Exactly.
They're concerned because they see 7,000 mostly military-age males who are jobless, who proclaimed an intent to violate our borders, break our laws, and they're not going to be moving to the neighborhoods that these journalists and these media talking heads talk about. They are not 7,000 unemployed journalists, for example, that are going to be going to Don Lemon's house and maybe competing with him for a job. They're coming to my neighborhood, inner city,
exactly.
Cleveland, and they're going to be competing against low-skilled workers. The data show predominantly black, male, low-skilled workers. They apparently don't have any concern for them. The military or the political imperative is such that they need and want to have more workers, more voters coming in from third world countries that they can indoctrinate. And this obsession with identity politics make people say and do profoundly stupid things. You saw it in the clips that you just ran. But they are completely divorced from the concerns of normal Americans with respect to what these individuals who are going to be imminently crossing the border are going to do with respect to the rule of law, our sovereignty, the public fisc, public health, crime rates, and so on.
So they are, as you just noted, the people you're watching on television and reading in the newspaper, to the extent anyone reads that newspaper anymore, they're arguing that this is a racial divide and that the villains are these, industrial era, post-industrial area, middle-class white people who are all bigots. But the voting pattern suggests something different, that it's not a racial question, like people who make under a certain threshold, no matter what their colors, are sort of figuring out that they are all, regardless of their color, being replaced by people who work for less than them. Do you think that at some point that will be obvious? That this isn't about race, it's about economics?
Yeah, I think it's becoming more and more obvious. I know that in my service on the Civil Rights Commission over a number of years, I can see that there's been a shift in the understanding. Low-skilled workers get it. The elites very often like to engage in this type of moralizing, makes them feel good about themselves.
Yeah.
But until they are threatened in terms of their job prospects or the quality of life in their neighborhoods, they can continue to engage in this political correctness. We see it. As a labor lawyer myself, I see the deleterious effects of this. They are significant. They are often elided by our elites, by political elites, our social elites, our betters in the media. It's unfortunate, but I think a day of reckoning is coming. We're seeing it more and more that ordinary Americans are getting it. And some of it actually has to do with the Trump effect, that Trump speaks plainly about these things. Sometimes he crosses or touches third rails. Right. He doesn't get hurt, but it engenders a conversation. A lot of people become apoplectic because of the conversation, but certain eternal verities emerge from that conversation.
I really think we should start importing millions of left-wing talk show hosts. I really do. And I am rooting for Jorge Ramos, who we interview a lot, to displace one of these self-righteous CNN anchors and see how they like it. And that's just the start. Waves of people with whom they can compete for jobs. Peter Christian, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tucker.
Great to see you. America votes 6 days from now. Florida, Georgia are two states that we're looking at carefully. Radical difference between the Republican and the Democrat in both those races, and they are on the knife's edge tonight. We've got an update in both. Meanwhile, the president holding a rally in Florida right now, trying to keep that state under Republican control. We're watching it for news. If it occurs, we'll go there. We'll be right back. Midterm elections just 6 days from tonight. Democrats across the country are scrambling to avoid squandering the blue wave that they have promised for months. In Florida, James O'Keefe's Project Veritas has released a new video where a staffer for Andrew Gillum, who's running for governor, calls white people crackers.
So, a gentleman called on the phone, and he said, fairy tales in the old days begin with once upon a time. Fairy tales in the modern day begin with once I am elected. Okay? So let's go back to Mr. Gillum's platform. Right? Mm-hmm. Raise the corporate tax in Florida from 7 to 11%. That will never happen. Raise teachers' pay to $50,000. That will never happen.
We can't verify the authenticity of the video we just showed you, but we have no reason to believe it's fake. In Georgia, meanwhile, Democratic gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams received the support of Oprah Winfrey. She continued to defend her decision to burn the state flag at a protest years ago.
26 years ago, as a college freshman, I, along with many other Georgians, including the governor of Georgia, were deeply disturbed by the racial divisiveness that was embedded in the state flag with that Confederate symbol.
Have we agreed that it's divisive, not divisive? The debate continues. Meanwhile, in Indiana, Democratic Senate incumbent Joe Donnelly stumbled through a debate where he awkwardly praised his staffers for doing a good job, apparently in spite of their ethnicity. Watch this.
Our state director is Indian American, but he does an amazing job. Our director of all constituent services, she's African American, but she does an even more incredible job than you could ever imagine.
It's just horrible. Independent Women's Voice senior fellow Lisa Booth returns once again to help us break down the races. I mean, I almost felt sorry for Donnelly. I mean, just to be totally honest, I doubt he meant what he said. I mean, I hope he didn't mean. Well, did anybody say anything about that?
He said he used the wrong conjunction. He meant to use and. And look, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but what frustrates me, if that was Mike Braun, the Republican candidate, nobody from the left and nobody in the media would be giving him the benefit of the doubt. Instead, they would be charging racism, and it would be a massive deal, which it, of course, is not going to be with Joe Donnelly.
No, but I still want to live in a country, even if we're doing it unilaterally, where we give people the benefit of the doubt.
I do, too, which is why I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt.
I'm going to here, but you're absolutely right. It would not work. It would not work the other way. So this video, apparently, of a Gillum staffer that James O'Keefe just came out with, has the Gillum campaign commented on this?
I've not seen if they've commented on it, but look, it wouldn't be surprising for Andrew Gillum and the people surrounding him to once again be lying to Florida voters. This is a guy who was deflected repeatedly when asked about the FBI investigation into a city. And remember, undercover agents, as of 2015, they got access to city officials, and Andrew Gillum was one of them. And those undercover agents did things like purchase a Hamilton ticket to take him to Hamilton a Hamilton play, rather. Took him on a boat tour around New York City. And then we've recently come to find out that one of them also paid for a political fundraiser in connection to his upcoming gubernatorial bid. So that is new information. And so Andrew Gillum keeps saying he's not the target, which we don't know if he is, which we don't know if he isn't. But he's lied about things like the Hamilton ticket. And there's also or who paid for the Hamilton ticket. There's also this second probe into Andrew Gillum as well through the Florida Commission on Ethics, looking at the trips he's taken in 2016. And we have new information on that. It turns out that despite one of his spokespeople telling us a year ago that that was official business, it turns out that he actually took a campaign trip to Tampa and paid for it through one of his mayoral accounts. So I have to imagine that that is also one of the things that the Florida Commission on Ethics is going to be looking into.
So Gillum has dismissed all these questions as racist, which is not actually an answer, for the record. Do we know what undercover FBI agents were doing in his presence? I mean, what was that about? Do we have any sense?
Well, and I think, the big thing that they were looking at is corruption in the city of Tallahassee pertaining to developers and deals with some of these city officials. Gillum has approved one of those deals that is under fire which was Adam Corey, one of his really close or formerly close friends, a lobbyist, his former campaign treasurer. So that guy we know is at the center and has been named in subpoenas. But Andrew Gillum keeps trying to deflect. But my question to him would be, if there's nothing nefarious going on, if the FBI didn't care about you, why did they go through the trouble of using undercover agents to grant access to you? And if you look at some of the things that former FBI agents have said publicly and in the news, they've said that something like that, to get access to a guy like Gillum, who is the mayor, they likely had to go to the DOJ to get approval.
I mean, at least it's a fair question, and attacking other people as bigots is not a satisfactory answer.
Right. Maybe just answer the question to be truthful.
Yeah, maybe let's start there.
Yeah, let's
Lisa
start
Muth,
there.
great to see you.
Thank you, Tucker.
Big Tech once again attacking free speech. This time they are labeling this very show, quote, dangerous content. We'll tell you what happened after the break. Plus, we're monitoring the president's rally in Florida. Right now, he's addressing birthright citizenship.
Not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States.
Not big government is now the top threat to free expression in America and around the world. That's a big change. Taken a lot of people time to metabolize it, but it's absolutely real. Here's one example. A couple of weeks ago, we appeared on Dennis Prager's YouTube channel, PragerU, to read an excerpt from our book, Ship of Fools. PragerU wanted to advertise that appearance on YouTube, but they were blocked by Google Ads. The reason, Google said, is that our video is, quote, dangerous or derogatory. Some of it refers to poor farmers and laborers as peasants. Well, that's a perfectly factual statement, common around the world. Doesn't matter, though. Well, the First Amendment shackles the government from suppressing views it doesn't like, at least for now. No laws currently protect the public from tech monopolies that control the flow of all human information. After PragerU appealed the censorship, Google Ads reversed its decision because they were embarrassed, as has happened many times, and in a statement to this program said, quote, the ad was mistakenly disapproved. But of course the damage had already been done. We're 6 days out from an election, and Google interfered with letting the public hear a political message. We know about this instance. How many other don't we know about? This is election tampering, and it's far more severe than anything that the Russians ever attempted. And speaking of which, since Google is publicly traded, it is owned in part by foreign governments. For some reason, though, Democrats don't seem eager to launch an investigation into any of this. Why? Because they're in that company's pocket. The left has made it clear that if free speech is an impediment to their agenda, free speech will have to go. And as this show has revealed, there are plenty of people at Google who are eager to use their power to push a political agenda and to change this country non-democratically. Well, just after filming that suppressed PragerU video, we sat down with Dennis Prager and Adam Carolla out in California to talk about free speech. It was a long interview. Here's part one from it. So the obvious question, Adam, is where are we? We're surrounded by vehicles in what looks like a garage.
Well, this is Prager's garage. I mean, look, I don't want to perpetuate a myth here, but the Jews love driving race cars. They love busting their knuckles. I mean, look at the man. This is my warehouse. These are my race cars. And Dennis can not only not fix them, he can't fit in them either.
Have you tried?
Well, I'm 6'4". It would be very difficult.
It would be difficult.
Right. We support the profession.
Yes.
Right.
I do too as a non-participant.
Okay.
So separate, since both of you have been speaking your opinions in public for a very long time, separate perception from reality. Do you think that we are actually less free to say what we think now than we were, say, 20 years ago, Adam?
Well, you can say whatever you want, like you could say whatever you want 20 years ago, but you won't have a job on Monday, and that's a big issue. So removing someone's livelihood because they have an opinion, it's really sort of the ultimate punishment. Like you're just not going to be able to work anymore. You'll be non-employable, especially in this town, Los Angeles. So, yes, people fear for their jobs. They fear for their careers. They sort of fear for their families, and thus they don't say what they would say. So can they do it? Yes, they can do it. Might they lose their job? Yes, they might lose their job, thus they don't do it.
So if I say you can do whatever you want, but if you step outside the lines, I'll crush you, I mean, is it a distinction without a difference? Do we have freedom of speech?
It's like the old dissident joke in the Soviet Union. What is the difference between the U.S. and the USSR? In the USSR, you have freedom of speech. In America, you have freedom after speech. That was the great Soviet. But now that's changed.
That's a Yakov Smirnoff joke, by the way. That's not.
Does he say that? Well,
I'm
because
sure.
Oh no, you're right. He probably got it from Soviet dissidents. He's Soviet. He was ex-Soviet.
Yeah, Yakov
you're right.
would go,
Yeah.
in your country, you can free to say things evil about Reagan. Our country is the same.
Right.
We can say evil things
That's right.
about Reagan.
Exactly. No, that's exactly
That
the
was the
same
joke.
idea.
Right.
I'll give you an example. I'm speaking in Colorado State University in 10 days, or 2 weeks, whatever it is, and there is article after article distorting what I have said to warn people about this bigot and fascist and white supremacist and everything that is coming to Colorado State. They prepare the students. I'll give you an example. I wrote a 2-part column about 10 years ago, and because I do a lot of work on male-female issues on my radio show. Every week for years I've talked about men and women. So I have, on the basis of talking to so many couples, simply offered the advice to a woman: if you love your husband and he is a good man, then don't let mood alone determine whether or not you'll have sex with him, because it's an important thing to him. So give it a try, okay?
I don't want to jump in, but is my wife still here? Lynette was here earlier,
She
right?
was.
Lynette!
All right.
There's some wisdom being... Is she gone?
This is my man.
Oh, my God, Dennis. Where?
I know.
She's not here?
Well, all right. So it's truly helpful. So here's the terrible part. In Huffington Post, just 2 weeks ago, a guy cited this from 10 years ago. Prager advocates marital rape. And that's what they wrote in the Colorado State University. The guy, beware, a guy who believes in marital rape is coming to campus.
That's disgusting.
Yes, it is disgusting.
So you all just made a film about the state of free expression in America. Just to jump ahead, how do the rest of us respond, particularly people who don't have TV shows or a 30-year track record of expressing their opinions? You're a normal guy with your own views because you're an American. How do you live in an age when everyone's terrified to be honest?
I think there's only one way to do it. I think if you retreat, they encroach.
Yes.
And I use an example, Dennis has heard it before, it's sort of the NRA versus the no smoking lobby. And I'll quickly do the metaphor here, which is 40 years ago, they said, we don't want smoking in restaurants. And they said, could you guys who are smoking in the main dining area just move to a smoking section? And everyone picked up their steak and their ashtrays, and they moved over there. And then they came to those people again, and they said, we don't want you with the diners. Could you move to the bar? And they all picked up their food and their ashtrays, and they moved to the bar, and they smoked. And then at a certain point, they said, could you stand out front and just smoke outside? And they said, well, it's cold, but we'll do it. They stood out front, and they went outside and smoked, and then they said, you're too close to the front door. Could you move it down the street? And they went to a park, and they said, no smoking at the park. The point is they won't stop moving forward. There's an agenda. The agenda is not get rid of the smoke in the restaurant. It's stomp you out.
At a certain point, you cannot let the left intimidate you. And when you don't, they go crazy because they're so used to being able to intimidate. That's his point, and I second it.
And also, once you sort of put it out there, like you're a country who doesn't negotiate with terrorists when they take hostages, they take less hostages. Once you put it out there that, hey, I'm a comedian, I have a podcast, I say what I want, and I won't apologize, they leave you alone because ultimately what they want is an apology and they want you backpedaling. And if you just sort of stand up like any bully, it's not satisfying for them. I say outrageous things all day long on my podcast. People say to me, how does that work? I say, well, I don't apologize, so I'm not on their list of people who need to apologize.
You're not the slowest gazelle, so it's not even worth bothering.
Right. So I would
like that.
argue,
You are not the slowest gazelle. I like that. No, I'm going to keep that.
That was part one of our interview with Adam Carolla and Dennis Prager. We'll be showing the rest later this week. 6 days till the midterm elections, a new report suggests that Robert Mueller may be trying secretly to subpoena the president. This is moving toward an indictment of the president. Is that even possible? Some say it is. Alan Dershowitz helps us make sense of all of it after the break. Just a few months ago, it seemed certain that Robert Mueller and the Russia investigation would dominate the midterms this year. It hasn't, but the special counsel has apparently been busy at work, of course. A new piece in Politico analyzed the investigation's court filings and concluded that Mueller may have tried to secretly subpoena the president. Today, though, the president said he has not received a subpoena, but it raises lots of questions, such as, can you subpoena a sitting president? Can you indict a sitting president? Is Mueller going to? Some of these questions don't have clear answers. One man with an idea, though, is Alan Dershowitz, who spent generations teaching at Harvard Law School. And he's the author, of course, of the case against impeaching Trump. He joins us tonight. Professor, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
Can any independent counsel subpoena a sitting president?
Yes, that's clear. And the president can comply with the subpoena if he chooses to, can challenge the entire subpoena, or can challenge portions of the subpoena based on executive privilege or the unwillingness of a president to answer questions about the exercise of his constitutional authority. So if the president were subpoenaed, it would guarantee a legal challenge that would probably take several years.
Several years. So
Yeah.
Informed people in Washington believe, and I don't know if they're right or not, but they believe that Robert Mueller has concluded that he can constitutionally indict a sitting president. Does that sound plausible that he's concluded that, and is it right? Can he?
I think it does not sound plausible. He's a cautious guy, and there are three reasons why he should not try to indict the president for obstruction of justice, which is what they're talking about.
Right.
Number one, the Justice Department itself has a rule that says you cannot indict a sitting president, and the text of the Constitution certainly looks that way when it talks about that you can indict and prosecute a president after he leaves office, after he is impeached and removed. Second of all, you can't indict a president for obstruction of justice if the president merely exercised his constitutional authorities under Article 2 by firing somebody or by pardoning somebody. The George W. Bush case establishes that. George W. Bush pardoned 5 people on the eve of their trial, including the former Secretary of Defense, and he did it for the purpose of ending the investigation, according to the special prosecutor, but the special prosecutor never considered indicting him or going after him. Third, President Trump simply didn't obstruct justice. You can't obstruct justice by doing things in public, by making statements in public and firing people in public. That's just not obstruction of justice. Obstruction of justice occurs in secret and behind closed doors.
So for the purposes of the president exercising his authority over executive branch employees, you're saying it doesn't matter what his motive might have been. He has an absolute right to hire or fire people who work for him.
Absolutely. And we know what George Bush's motives were. They were not good motives. But you can't question the motives of a president. Look, presidents have mixed motives. They want to go down in history. They want to have big fees for their speeches. They want to teach at universities. They want to help their party. The idea that a special prosecutor can begin to psychoanalyze a president and go to the motives of why he exercised the constitutionally permissible act would take us down a very, very dangerous path.
Yeah. You really are the voice of reason on this stuff. Not a Trump voter. I know our viewers know that, but I just want to make it totally
not
clear.
A Trump voter. No, and not a Trump supporter when it comes to his idea about immigration policy. And
I'm sure.
And a person is born in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction. He's a citizen, and the president can't do anything about that.
Professor, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
As the migrant caravan continues to approach our southern border, the press continues to tell us that it's not a threat, no threat at all, and native-born Americans are the real threat to America. We'll talk to someone who may agree with that next. The migrant caravan is continuing to march north at this hour. When they arrive, if they arrive, they'll be greeted by thousands of liberal activists puffed up with self-righteousness, whose chief goal is to help anyone who is not American. That impulse is so powerful that it has even made Planned Parenthood in favor of childbirth. The nation's biggest abortion provider tweeted opposition to the president's proposed executive order changing birthright citizenship. They called it despicable and egregious, unlike anything they do 300,000 times a year. And that's just one example of what has erupted since the caravan began making its way here. The left has gone crazy. Enrique Acevedo has watched all of this. He's an anchor at Univision, and he joins us tonight. Enrique, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
So I just want a reality check. I think for the last month or so I've been hearing from all the truly good people who host cable news shows in this country that the caravan is nothing to worry about at all. These are all really decent people. Their families looking for a better life. And let me just say, I think probably most of them are. But now we learn from the U.S. Border Patrol that it's 70% single men. Now we learn from the Mexican ambassador to the United States that this group has been, quote, very violent and assaulted Mexican authorities on the Guatemalan border. So shouldn't I be a little more concerned about them coming here?
We have to realize this is a humanitarian crisis and all the countries involved should act accordingly. If I say this is not a security threat, you're going to find an argument to call that a lie. So why don't we find out? Why don't we, with your show and with my show on Univision, travel to Mexico, spend some time reporting, trying to figure out who's part of this caravan. If there are thugs and criminals and Middle Easterners, like the president says, we'll report that, and we owe that to our audiences. If they're not a security threat, we should also report that. We owe our audiences the truth.
Well, I mean, both of our companies are doing that. You all have reporters down there. Fox News also does. But it's not really up to the media to decide who comes to our country. It's up, because this is a democracy, it's up to American voters who have elected representatives who made a lot of laws about this, which you're now saying we need to ignore. So the people in charge are U.S. citizens, American voters, and they're being ignored. They have a system of legal immigration, which this caravan is giving the finger to. So why do I have any responsibility to learn anything about the caravan? If they want to come here, they can go apply for citizenship or apply for a visa to come here, a green card. What am I missing?
I think you're missing a key element of what they say they want to do. They want to arrive at the border and claim asylum legally. They respect that legal process, and they are honoring that process by stating they want to come to the border, a port of entry, and then apply for asylum legally. That's what they're trying to do.
Asylum for
despite the fact that everyone else says they want to come in illegally. It wouldn't make any sense to, be on a caravan with thousands of people to try to sneak in anywhere. I think you want to do that on your own.
But they're passing U.S. consulates along the way. They've already been offered asylum by the country of Mexico, and they've said no.
And many of them are taking it and staying in Mexico.
But some are, that's true, and it's nice of Mexico to do that. But a lot of them aren't. Thousands aren't. But I guess my question is, asylum from what? I mean, there's no war going on in Honduras right now that I'm aware of. It's a poor country. It's always been a poor country. That's not America's fault. It's not Donald Trump's fault. Why does that make me obligated to pay for this caravan? I'm honestly confused.
Well, we can spend a little money there and make a big difference at our border, or we can keep spending billions of dollars of taxpayer money at our border to make no difference in the places where these people are coming from. We have been trying to seal the border for the last 40 years. Donald Trump is actually doubling down on some of the failed policies of the past instead of looking for a new approach.
The one where we
spend more time fighting the root causes of immigration.
Well, how about this one, though? How about, and this is just something that came to me, how about building a very high impenetrable wall across the border? Do you think that would happen? That's never been tried. I think Trump wanted to try it.
We already have a 700-mile wall in a 2,000-mile border, so it's being tried, and it's not helping. I don't know how building a wall will solve the issues that are making these people leave their country with their families. I really don't know how that's going to make a difference.
Maybe you're right.
I mean, you can do it and spend $25 billion of taxpayer money doing it. But what happens if it doesn't work?
Okay, then maybe move on to something else. But American voters just voted for that in the last election. And then all the moralizing chin-tuggers are telling them you're a racist for wanting that. At least you've conceded American citizens have a right to determine what kind of border barrier they have, just as every other country does.
Every country
has
that
walls,
right, of course.
A lot of them work. But again,
I think we've been doing that for the past half a century. We've been trying to militarize the border. We have 21,000 well-armed men, drones, a 700-mile wall, high-tech surveillance equipment, all sorts of things at the border. And it's not working, Tucker. We should be focusing on the root causes of immigration.
But you're not even against, but hold on. You're not against illegal immigration. Let's be clear. There are 22 million illegals in our country right now. I think they should all be deported tomorrow, and they can reapply if they want to come back because it makes a mockery of our laws. You disagree with that. So that's okay. I'm not mad at you, but don't tell me about how you support border security because by definition you don't. You don't care at all about it, right?
It's not that I don't support border security. It's that I think that's not going to solve the issue. That's not going to solve the issue in its essence. People are going to keep
Deporting
coming.
22 million people might get pretty close to solving the issue.
If the strategy is just to stop people once they show up at the door, that's not going to work out. And we have the last half a century to prove it. Let's start a different approach. Why don't we try solving some of the issues that are making these people leave their homes with their families, leaving everything behind?
Fix Honduras.
Spend a little money there,
right,
make a big difference
here. Just a little money to fix Honduras. Okay, okay. I'm sure
we don't
we'll
want
come
to
up with
fix
things
Honduras,
no
but you can make a difference. US aid has made a difference
not a big deal.
in some of the most violent communities, and there are plenty of reports that prove that.
Yeah, let's fix Iraq first, and then Afghanistan, and bring peace to the Middle East. Then we'll fix Honduras.
Let's fix the U.S. first, and then we can care about the rest of the world.
Perfect. Enrique, great to see you, as always. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Google knows everything about you, likely know more than your spouse does, but for 8 years they refused to update photographs of an isolated military base in the western U.S. Why is that? We're interested in that question, and we'll get a little closer to the answer after the break.
Your insurance...
The migrant caravan is continuing to march north at this hour. When they arrive, if they arrive, they'll be greeted by thousands of liberal activists puffed up with self-righteousness, whose chief goal is to help anyone who is not American. That impulse is so powerful that it has even made Planned Parenthood in favor of childbirth. The nation's biggest abortion provider tweeted opposition to the president's proposed executive order changing birthright citizenship. They called it despicable and egregious, unlike anything they do 300,000 times a year. And that's just one example of what has erupted since the caravan began making its way here. The left has gone crazy. Enrique Acevedo has watched all of this. He's an anchor at Univision, and he joins us tonight. Enrique, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
So I just want a reality check. I think for the last month or so, I've been hearing from all the truly good people who host cable news shows in this country that the caravan is nothing to worry about at all. These are all really decent people. Their families looking for a better life. And let me just say, I think probably most of them are. But now we learn from the U.S. Border Patrol that it's 70% single men. Now we learn from the Mexican ambassador to the United States that this group has been, quote, very violent and assaulted Mexican authorities on the Guatemalan border. So shouldn't I be a little more concerned about them coming here?
We have to realize this is a humanitarian crisis, and all the countries involved should act accordingly. If I say this is not a security threat, you're going to find an argument to call that a lie. So why don't we find out? Why don't we, with your show and with my show on Univision, travel to Mexico, spend some time reporting, trying to figure out who's part of this caravan. If there are thugs and criminals and Middle Easterners, like the president says, we'll report that, and we owe that to our audiences. If they're not a security threat, we should also report that. We owe our audiences the truth.
Well, I mean, both of our companies are doing that. You all have reporters down there. Fox News also does. But it's not really up to the media to decide who comes to our country. It's up, because this is a democracy, it's up to American voters who have elected representatives who made a lot of laws about this, which you're now saying we need to ignore. So the people in charge are U.S. citizens, American voters, and they're being ignored. They have a system of legal immigration, which this caravan is giving the finger to. So why do I have any responsibility to learn anything about the caravan? If they want to come here, they can go apply for citizenship or apply for a visa to come here, a green card. What am I missing?
I think you're missing a key element of what they say they want to do. They want to arrive at the border and claim asylum legally. They respect that legal process, and they are honoring that process by stating they want to come to the border, a port of entry, and then apply for asylum legally. That's what they're trying to do.
Asylum for
despite the fact that everyone else says they want to come in illegally. It wouldn't make any sense to, be on a caravan with thousands of people to try to sneak in anywhere. I think you want to do that on your own.
But they're passing U.S. consulates along the way. They've already been offered asylum by the country of Mexico, and they've said no.
And many of them are taking it and staying in Mexico.
But some are, that's true, and it's nice of Mexico to do that. But a lot of them aren't. Thousands aren't. But I guess my question is, asylum from what? I mean, there's no war going on in Honduras right now that I'm aware of. It's a poor country. It's always been a poor country. That's not America's fault. It's not Donald Trump's fault. Why does that make me obligated to pay for this caravan? I'm honestly confused.
Well, we can spend a little money there and make a big difference at our border, or we can keep spending billions of dollars of taxpayer money at our border to make no difference in the places where these people are coming from. We have been trying to seal the border for the last 40 years. Donald Trump is actually doubling down on some of the failed policies of the past instead of looking for a new approach.
The one where we build
we spend more time fighting the root causes of immigration.
Well, how about this one, though? How about, and this is just something that came to me, how about building a very high impenetrable wall across the border? Do you think that would that's never been tried? I think Trump wanted to try it.
We already have a 700-mile wall in a 2,000-mile border, so it's been tried, and it's not helping. I don't know how building a wall will solve the issues that are making these people leave their country with their families. I really don't know how that's going to make a difference.
You know, maybe you're right.
I mean, you can do it and spend $25 billion of taxpayer money in doing it. But what happens if it doesn't work?
Okay, then maybe move on to something else. But American voters just voted for that in the last election. And then all the moralizing chin-tuggers are telling them you're a racist for wanting that. At least you've conceded American citizens have a right to determine what kind of border barrier they have, just as every other country does.
Every country has that right, of course.
A lot of them work. But
and
again,
I think we've been doing that for the past half a century. We've been trying to militarize the border. We have 21,000 well-armed men, drones, a 700-mile wall, high-tech surveillance equipment, all sorts of things at the border. And it's not working, Tucker. We should be focusing on the root causes of immigration.
But you're not even against, but hold on. You're not against illegal immigration. Let's be clear. There are 22 million illegals in our country right now. I think they should all be deported tomorrow, and they can reapply if they want to come back because it makes a mockery of our laws. You disagree with that. So that's okay. I'm not mad at you, but don't tell me about how you support border security because by definition you don't. You don't care at all about it, right?
It's not that I don't support border security. It's that I think that's not going to solve the issue. That's not going to solve the issue in its essence. People are going to keep